Rain fell softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Damon Sterling's penthouse office, blurring the lights of downtown Seattle into streaks of gold and silver. The sound was muffled but rhythmic, a steady companion to the quiet that filled the room. He stood motionless before the glass, one hand in the pocket of his slate gray suit, the other holding a glass of untouched scotch. Outside, the city pulsed with life, with ambition, with noise. But up here, 38 stories above it all, everything felt still lonely, even at 35. Damon had built Sterling Systems into a behemoth, a company whispered about in Silicon Valley boardrooms and tech investor circles. His face graced magazines, his name echoed in TED Talks and corporate summits. Yet none of it made the silence feel any less deafening. Wealth had become a fortress, accomplishment, a shield, and somewhere along the climb, he had misplaced the simple language of connection. The soft knock at his door was punctual, as always. "Come in," he said, turning as Victoria Hayes stepped into the room. Her presence was a breath of calm, precise, measured, and reassuringly steady. She wore her usual charcoal suit, crisp blouse, and her auburn hair tied back in a neat twist. But today, something was different. Damon couldn't place it. Maybe the softness in her eyes, or the subtle confidence in her posture. She moved with the grace of someone who knew the world might underestimate her, and didn't mind one bit. "The quarterly reports," she said, placing a slim leather binder on the edge of his desk, summarized, color-coded, and the financial projections cross-checked. "Your meeting with R&D is at 10, and the legal team confirmed contract approvals for Tokyo." She glanced up. Also, the board's internal memo about next week's gala came through. Damon nodded, but didn't move toward the desk. He looked at her for a moment longer than usual, then set his drink down. "Victoria," he said quietly, "there's something else." She stilled, her expression unreadable, but alert. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," he exhaled slowly, pacing a few steps away before turning back to face her. "There's a charity ball this Saturday night. The Children's Hope Foundation. You probably saw it on the company-wide calendar." "I did," she replied, waiting. "I'd like you to attend," he said, "as my guest." A pause stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. Victoria blinked, not with confusion, but with calculation. "You mean attend, not coordinate logistics, not take notes, not prep the talking points for your table?" "No," Damon said, his voice softer. "I mean attend. Sit beside me, be seen with me." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was charged. She stepped forward slightly, her heels soft against the marble floor. "Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but why me?" Damon gave a short, quiet laugh, almost embarrassed. "Because everyone else who's asked me to that gala sees it as a networking event, another photo opportunity. You'd actually listen to the foundation director. You'd ask thoughtful questions. You'd understand why it matters." She looked away briefly, processing, her mind likely racing through every implication. "I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Sterling, but you do realize what it will look like? The headlines, the assumptions. People won't see me as a conversation partner. They'll see me as the assistant." "I'm aware," he said, moving to his desk at last, leaning his hands on the polished mahogany. "But I stopped caring what those people think a long time ago." Victoria didn't respond immediately. Her hands rested gently in front of her, and for a brief second, Damon could see the guardedness drop. She wasn't worried about embarrassment. She was worried about being a prop, an accessory. "I need to think about it," she said finally, her voice firm but respectful. Damon nodded. "Of course, take your time." She left quietly, the door clicking shut behind her, and for a while, the rain was the only sound once more, but Damon knew what would come next. Downstairs, in the lush private lounge of the Emerald City Club, Jonathan Pierce was already smirking across a glass of brandy. "Did you hear?" he said to Catherine Blackwood and Richard Hawthorne. "Sterling's bringing his assistant to the ball." "His assistant?" Catherine's voice sharpened like a knife. "Not me." "She must have done something very special to get that invite," Richard added, chuckling under his breath. "Is this what loneliness looks like for billionaires now?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair, smug and satisfied. Poor guy. All that money and no one real to share it with. So now he's pulling from the secretarial pool. The laughter echoed in the marble halls of the club. But Damon Sterling, back in his glass tower, said nothing. He had heard it all before. This time, he simply waited, because he knew what they didn't. Victoria Hayes wasn't just someone from the sidelines. She was about to become the center of the story. The rain continued through the night, drumming softly on Victoria Hayes' apartment window as she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea cooling in her hands. The scent of jasmine faded slowly into the room as her thoughts returned again and again to Damon's invitation, not the wording he had been polite, sincere, even deferential, but the weight behind the words, the question left unspoken. Why now? Why her? She had worked for him for 3 years. In that time, they had built an efficient, almost symphonic rhythm to their professional interactions. She anticipated his moods. He trusted her judgment. And though their conversations had always remained on the edge of formal, there had been moments brief and rare when something else flickered beneath the surface. A glance held along, a softened voice, a silence that said more than any sentence could. But this was something else. This wasn't rescheduling a flight or finalizing investor notes. This was him, stepping across a line neither of them had ever acknowledged out loud. Her phone buzzed. It was Emma, her younger sister, sending a photo of herself at a campus event, complete with exaggerated duck lips and a peace sign. The caption read, "Meanwhile, in the land of ramen and student loans, Victoria managed a small smile, typing back, "Meanwhile, your sister might be attending a billionaire's ball." The typing bubble appeared instantly. Then the call came. "You what?" Emma's voice cracked through the phone. "Please tell me you said yes." "I didn't say anything," Victoria replied, pacing to the window. "I asked for time." "Why would you need time? The man is drop-dead gorgeous, owns half of downtown Seattle, and trusts you with more decisions than his entire executive team. This isn't a rom-com, Emma," Victoria said quietly. "It's a professional world, and if I show up there, in that room, on his arm, people will assume things that might affect my credibility at work." Emma paused. "You're worried about being seen as a prop. I'm worried about being reduced to one." "Then don't let them," Emma said fiercely. "You've earned your place, Victoria. Anyone who can't see that well, maybe they shouldn't be in the room in the first place." Victoria hung up with a thank you she meant, but the knot in her chest didn't loosen. She knew how the elite operated. She'd seen them at board dinners, watched them dismiss servers without a glance, observed how women like Catherine Blackwood could slice reputations apart with a single arched eyebrow. She knew what she'd be walking into, and so did Damon. The next morning, she arrived at Sterling Tower earlier than usual. The building's marble lobby echoed beneath her heels as she passed the glass elevators and entered the executive suite. The silence felt heavier today, like the entire floor was holding its breath. She reviewed Damon's itinerary, organized the memos from their Tokyo office, and gathered the final brief for his call with the legal team. But the entire time, her hands moved with mechanical precision, her mind replaying the invitation like a looped recording. Damon arrived precisely at 8 a.m., as he always did, tailored, composed, and unreadable. But today, when their eyes met, something passed between them, a question hanging in midair. "I've confirmed your investor call with Munich," she said, holding out the file. He took it gently. "And the other matter?" Victoria hesitated. "May I give you my answer after lunch?" He nodded once. Of course. They didn't speak of it again that morning, but something had shifted. A tremor beneath the surface of their polished world. At 12:30, she stepped out into the gray afternoon and walked without direction through the heart of the city. She found herself passing luxury boutiques, pausing at the glass displays filled with gowns she couldn't afford and wouldn't wear. She imagined herself standing next to Damon in one of those dresses, walking past people like Jonathan Pierce or Catherine Blackwood. Could she really hold her head high? Would they see her as a woman of substance or just the assistant who dared to dream afar? She almost turned back, almost sent him a text saying she couldn't do it. But then she saw a reflection in the boutique glass, not of herself, but of her mother, standing with her in a thrift store years ago, gently pinning a hand-me-down blazer for Victoria's first job. Interview, confidence, sweetheart, her mother had said, "They don't sell it in stores. You carry it with you." She exhaled. Her heart steadied. She returned to the office and knocked on Damon's door precisely at 2 p.m. He stood from behind his desk the moment she entered. "I accept," she said, voice steady, "but I'm attending as your guest, not your ornament. I'll speak for myself, and I won't pretend to be someone I'm not." His face softened into something that almost resembled relief. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." Behind his calm exterior, something stirred in his eyes, a flicker of anticipation, and maybe, just maybe, something deeper, but neither of them noticed the camera flash in the hallway, or the whisper that began circulating in hushed circles. Hours later, Damon Sterling is bringing his assistant to the ball. Must be desperation. Jonathan Pierce was the first to laugh. Catherine Blackwood was the first to hiss. But what none of them realized was this: Victoria Hayes wasn't coming to fit in. She was coming to be unforgettable. The city shimmered under a rare clear sky as the evening light dipped below the Seattle skyline. Downtown buzzed with black cars and velvet gowns. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel transformed into a palace of white roses, chandeliers, and curated opulence. Inside, the elite of the Pacific Northwest gathered for the most exclusive event of the season, the Children's Hope Foundation Ball. But outside, just rounding the corner in a sleek black limousine, Victoria Hayes sat silent, her palms cold. Despite the car's soft heat, the midnight blue gown clung to her in just the right places, elegant, modest, striking. Her mother's pearl necklace rested gently on her collarbone, a whisper of another era's dignity. Her hair, styled into a soft twist, left gentle tendrils framing her face. She looked nothing like the woman who spent her mornings coordinating conference calls and proofreading speeches, and yet she had never felt more like herself. Damon sat beside her, impeccable in a tailored tuxedo that fit like armor. But his posture wasn't the usual steel straight. His fingers tapped lightly against his leg, betraying nerves that Victoria had never seen in him. He turned toward her. One last chance to disappear before the flashbulbs go off. She met his gaze. I'd rather walk through the fire than crawl through the side door. His expression softened, not with amusement, but with respect. Then let's do it together. The car eased to a stop. Outside, the red carpet stretched like a spotlighted gauntlet, flanked by media cameras and guests whose names opened doors across the country. A valet opened the door, and Damon stepped out first. Then he turned, extending a hand to Victoria. The moment her heels touched the pavement, the crowd shifted. The camera flashes began, rapid, bright, invasive. Whispers followed, slithering through the crowd like smoke. Who is she? She's not from the usual circles. She's his assistant. Isn't she? Victoria kept her eyes ahead, her chin lifted. Damon's hand was firm, reassuring at the small of her back inside the ballroom. The whispers became stares, and then the stares became smiles, not all of them kind. Catherine Blackwood, resplendent in crimson silk, approached with a champagne, flute in hand and a predator's smile. Damon, she purred, you look refreshingly traditional tonight, and this must be the assistant we've all heard about. Victoria, was it? Yes, Victoria said calmly, extending her hand. It's a pleasure, Miss Blackwood. I've heard. Plenty. Catherine's grip tightened for just a second. Her eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed sweet. I admire your courage. Coming to an event like this takes confidence. Victoria tilted her head. Not courage, Catherine, just conviction. Damon watched the exchange with quiet awe. Victoria wasn't flinching. She was matching their elegance, their wit, and outshining it with sincerity. Not everyone was so subtle. Jonathan Pierce, in his white tuxedo jacket and arrogant smirk, cornered Damon near the bar. You know they're already taking bets, he said with a grin, on whether you finally lost your mind. I mean, this? He tilted his chin toward Victoria, across the room. She's what you're bringing to the ball of the year. Damon's jaw clenched. You mean the assistant who's been the backbone of my company for 3 years? Who has more emotional intelligence than half this room combined? Come on, Jonathan said, sipping his drink. I'm just saying, appearances matter. This isn't a staff appreciation dinner. This is the event. Your image, your investors. Damon leaned closer, lowering his voice. Jonathan, the day I start choosing my date based on investors. Expectations is the day I stop being a man and start being a puppet. Sue yourself. Jonathan replied coolly. Just don't act surprised when the board starts whispering. But Damon wasn't listening anymore, because Victoria had just approached their table, and with her, every conversation seemed to pause. Their table, carefully chosen by Damon, seated some of the most powerful people in the city: Senator William Ashford and his wife, philanthropic powerhouse Sophia Martinez, and tech entrepreneur Michael Chen. Victoria greeted them with poise, asking thoughtful questions and listening with genuine interest. She didn't fake small talk. She steered it toward substance. Miss Hayes, Senator Ashford said, clearly impressed. I've heard your name associated with several of Sterling Technologies' community initiatives. I've coordinated a few, she replied. But the real credit goes to the people executing on the ground. They're the ones who show up when no one's watching. Sophia Martinez leaned in. That's a rare answer in this room. Victoria smiled, not coy, but confident, that maybe it's time this room started hearing more of them. Damon couldn't stop watching her. This wasn't a moment of transformation. It was a moment of revelation. The world was finally seeing the woman he had known all along, and now that light was radiating. Impossible to ignore Dot as the dinner plates were cleared and an orchestra tuned for the first dance. Victoria excused herself briefly to the powder room. Catherine followed, slipping in like a shadow. Let me give you some advice, she said, checking her lipstick in the mirror. This world, it eats people like you alive. You're a novelty now, a story, but they'll discard you the moment your headlines go cold. Victoria met her eyes in the mirror. Then I won't give them a headline. I'll give them a legacy. Catherine froze. Victoria turned, adjusting the pearls around her neck with a steady hand. I'm not here to play their game, she said. I'm here to rewrite it. When she returned to the ballroom, the lights dimmed. The orchestra began to play a slow waltz. Dame and stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching her with something more than admiration, reverence. He extended his hand. Would you dance with me? She took it. As they moved together beneath the chandeliers, the room faded. All that remained was the music, the rhythm, the weight of everything unspoken finally starting to rise to the surface from the shadows. Jonathan watched, drink frozen midair. She's changing him, Richard muttered beside him. You can see it. No, Jonathan said slowly, his jaw tight. She's not just changing him. She's elevating him, and for the first time in his carefully constructed life, Damon Sterling didn't care who was watching. He was exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly who he wanted beside him, and the night was only beginning. The final notes of the waltz lingered in the air as Damon and Victoria stepped off the dance floor, drawing a trail of curious glances behind them. The shimmer of chandeliers bounced off crystal glasses and silver accents. But the ballroom felt warmer now, softer somehow, as if, for just a moment, their dance had changed the temperature in the room. Victoria wasn't sure what surprised her more, that Damon had looked at her like she was the only one in the world, or that she hadn't flinched when he did. She followed him back to their table, smiling politely as another wave of guests stopped Damon to shake his hand and offer murmured compliments. You'd look radiant out there, Senator Ashford said, raising his glass. I didn't know Damon even danced, Michael Chen added with a smirk. You've managed the impossible. I've learned to manage quite a bit, Victoria said smoothly, her eyes flicking toward Damon's with subtle amusement. But as the evening wound down and the string quartet shifted to quieter melodies, a figure approached their table whom Victoria hadn't expected to see again. Sophia Martinez, the poised director of the Children's Hope Foundation. Her midnight green gown shimmered as she walked, but it was the strength in her expression that stood out. Miss Hayes, she said, leaning down just slightly, would you have a moment after the event? I'd like to speak with you privately. Of course, Victoria replied, surprised. I'd be honored. Sophia's hand rested briefly on Victoria's shoulder before she walked away, her presence commanding even as she melted back into the crowd. Damon glanced sideways, eyebrows raised. That was unusual. She said she wants to speak with me privately, Victoria said, trying to sound casual. But her heart beat faster. About what? I guess I'll find out. Victoria excused herself shortly after the final dessert course and found Sophia waiting by the terrace, where the city lights spread out like scattered diamonds beyond the glass. I'll get straight to it, Sophia said. Tonight, you didn't just show up, you arrived. There are women who have graced this ballroom for 20 years and still haven't held the room, like you did during that conversation with Senator Ashford. You carry yourself with the precision of a diplomat and the purpose of someone who believes in something greater than herself. I appreciate that, Victoria said quietly, unsure where this was heading. I need someone to lead our new corporate partnerships division. Sophia continued, you build relationships across the Pacific Northwest, design impact campaigns, guide executives toward meaningful social investment. I believe you're perfect for it. Victoria blinked, stunned. This isn't charity, Sophia added. It's strategy. You'd have a team, a larger salary, and full freedom to shape how corporations engage with our foundation. And frankly, your last name doesn't matter. To me, what matters is what you've already proven. I'm honored, Victoria said, breath-catching. Truly, but I already have a job. Sophia smiled, almost knowingly. Yes, one where you've been hiding in the background. Don't think too long, Victoria. This offer won't stay open forever. As she returned to the ballroom, the gravity of it sank in. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, everything she believed, and amplified, but taking it would mean leaving Damon's world. Or worse, risking the illusion of neutrality they had both so carefully maintained inside. Damon was surrounded by board members, but broke away the moment he saw her. Everything all right? He asked. She offered me a job, Victoria said. Bluntly Dame and didn't flinch. I thought she might. You knew? I've worked with Sophia long enough to recognize when she sees potential. And she saw it in you the moment you spoke. Victoria nodded, but the air between them had changed. The temperature had dropped. I haven't said yes, she added, her voice barely audible beneath the swell of the orchestra. Don't decide because of me, he said, gently. If this is what you want, you have to take it. But what if I want both? She whispered. The work, and this, whatever this is. Damon opened his mouth to respond, but Jonathan's voice interrupted, loud and drunken from across the room. Victoria, he called out, raising his glass. You've certainly had your debutante moment tonight. I do hope you kept your name tag, though. Wouldn't want anyone to forget where you came from. The laughter around him was hollow, cruel. Damon turned sharply. His entire frame coiled with restrained fury, but Victoria placed a hand gently on his arm. Don't, she said. He's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. With that, she turned her back on Jonathan Pierce, on the stairs, on the echoes of laughter, and Damon followed her without hesitation. They exited the ballroom together, slipping out through the side corridor and into the cool evening air. On the sidewalk, under a canopy of stars and city lights, Victoria finally turned to him. I need clarity, Damon, she said. I've spent 3 years giving you everything I have professionally. I never expected this to turn into more, but now that it has, I need to know, what are we? Damon was quiet for a long moment, watching her like she was both the question and the answer. I'm not used to needing people, he said at last, but you make me want to be the kind of man who's worth needing. Victoria's breath caught. But if you stay in your current role because of me, he continued, then I'll always wonder if I'm holding you back. And if I go, she asked, then I'll follow you. He said, wherever you go. She looked at him, eyes glossy with unshed tears. You mean that? I've never meant anything more. But the world was already catching up with them. As they returned to the car, Victoria's phone buzzed with a notification, a blog post. Title, Tech Billionaire Damon Sterling Debuts Mystery Woman. Who is she really? Beneath it, a grainy photo of their dance. Then another. Sources confirm she's his assistant. Scandalous power dynamic or secret romance? Victoria stared at the screen, heart sinking. The world wasn't going to wait for them to define the relationship. It had already defined it for them. And now they had to decide, fight for control of their own story, or let it be written by others. As the car pulled away into the Seattle night, the stakes had never been higher, and neither had the risk. Monday morning arrived like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon, silent but ominous. Victoria stood in the mirror of her modest Capitol Hill apartment, watching the woman she had become over the last 72 hours. Her tailored blazer rested crisply on her shoulders, her hair neatly pinned, her heels lined beside the door. She looked composed, competent, calm, but inside, everything was shifting. The articles had not stopped. By Sunday afternoon, the story of Damon Sterling's assistant date had gone viral across corporate gossip blogs and local business networks. Some praised her poise. Others dissected every detail of her background, education, and most painfully, her salary. The comments were worse. Climbing the ladder in heels, office romance, or power imbalance? As she knows how to schedule more than meetings now, Victoria didn't reply to any of them. She didn't have to. The silence in the office would say it all. She entered Sterling Tower precisely at 7:58 a.m. The executive floor was unusually quiet, but not empty. Whispers stopped when she passed. Colleagues glanced up from their desks and quickly looked away. By the time she reached her own desk, She had already counted 5 people pretending not to be watching her dot at 8 o'clock sharp. The elevator chimed. Damon stepped out, his usual armor in place, navy suit, silk tie, and that quiet but undeniable command that made people straighten in his presence. But when his eyes found her, they softened. "Good morning, Victoria." "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she replied, matching his tone for the sake of their audience. He hesitated just slightly, then continued toward his office. The door clicked shut behind him. The silence returned, but it didn't last. By 10 a.m., Richard Hawthorne, venture capitalist, board member, and professional snake in expensive suits, had called Damon directly. "Interesting headlines this weekend," Richard said, voice like cold marble. "Is there something the board should be aware of? Is there a problem?" Damon replied flatly, "Depends on who you ask. If you're just enjoying the company of your employee outside work, well, I suppose it's your prerogative. But when her name starts trending above your latest product launch, you might want to reassess the optics." "I'm not interested in managing optics, Richard. I'm interested in results." "Be careful," Richard warned. "Mixing power and personal feelings has brought down bigger men than you." Damon ended the call without responding, but the words lingered longer than he wanted to admit. At 11 a.m., Victoria's calendar pinged with a meeting request. Private, 6:30 p.m., Damon Sterling's office. Her stomach twisted. By noon, she'd made her decision. She stepped out into the drizzle of a Seattle afternoon and walked the 7 blocks to the cafe, where she'd first met Sophia Martinez after the gala. She needed answers, Victoria, Sophia said warmly, standing to greet her. "I had a feeling you might come. Is the offer still open?" Victoria asked without preamble. "It is, for 3 more days. I need someone decisive, passionate, brave, and protected," Victoria added sharply, "because right now, I feel like a headline, not a person." Sophia's expression sobered. "That's exactly why I offered you the job, because I've been there. Because this industry is stacked against women who dare to rise without pedigree. I see you, Victoria, not just as potential, as proof." Victoria swallowed hard. "And, Damon, you need to decide," Sophia said gently, "whether he's your reason to stay or your reason to go. Either way, you can't live halfway." Back at the office, dusk began to settle over the city. The rain had grown heavier, streaking down the windows of Damon's 38th floor like a gray veil. At 6:30 on the dot, Victoria stepped into his office. He stood by the window, back turned. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said without looking. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I suppose I deserve that," he said, finally facing her. "I should have anticipated what would happen. I should have protected you better." "You weren't the one who published those headlines," she replied. "But you did invite me into your world without preparing me for its teeth." He stepped closer. "I didn't see you as someone who needed protecting." "I don't," she said. "But I need honesty." There it was, the moment neither of them had been willing to name. The silence between them wasn't filled with tension anymore. It was filled with truth. "I'm not your assistant tonight, Damon," she said. "So tell me, without the title, without the board, without the fear, what am I to you?" Damon looked at her, really looked at her. "You're the first person who's made me feel seen in years," he said, "not as a CEO, not as a bank account, as a man, and that terrifies me." Victoria's breath hitched. "Because I can leave." "No," he whispered, "because you're the only one I want to stay." They were inches apart now. She could smell the faint trace of his cologne. She could feel the heat of his regret, of his restraint. "I was offered the job again," she said. He nodded slowly. "Then I won't stop you, but you could," she whispered. "I won't," he repeated. "Because if I mean anything to you at all, I want to be chosen, not inherited, not expected, chosen." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "And if I stay," his voice broke slightly, "then I'll make sure you never have to question why I asked you to that ball in the first place." She reached for the door handle, but paused. "I haven't decided," she said, "but I'm close." As she closed the door behind her, Damon felt the weight of his silence crash against his chest like a wave. If he lost her, not as an assistant, not as a partner, but as Victoria, he didn't know what would remain of the man he was becoming, and he didn't know how long he could wait for her to choose. But he would, even if it cost him everything. The next morning broke with silence. No rain, no wind, just a stillness that made the city feel like it was waiting, breath held, Heartbeat paused. Victoria stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the untouched coffee cooling in her cup. Her phone sat beside it, Sophia's message still open. Final confirmation needed by noon today. The offer was real. The pay, the title, the independence. It was everything she dreamed back when she was a college student working double shifts and sharing ramen with Emma in their tiny Bellevue apartment. But now, it meant leaving him, and not just Damon, the man. Damon, the constant, the silence breaker, the person who had quietly reshaped her world. By 9 a.m., she was at her desk, early as always. She filed the morning memos, reviewed the Tokyo upgrades, spoke with the R&D team, all with the elegance of a woman who had not slept a minute. At 9:45, her phone rang. A known number. She answered. Victoria Hayes. It's Sophia. No pressure. But if you're leaning toward yes, I'd love to announce it at this afternoon's board luncheon. You become a name they're watching. Victoria hesitated. I'll call you by 11. She hung up and exhaled shakily. Then she did something unexpected. She walked past her desk, past the glass doors, past Damon's closed office, and headed straight for the elevator. 20 minutes later, she stood at the top of Queen and Hill, outside the estate where Damon's mother, Diana Sterling, lived. Victoria had only spoken to her briefly at a few company galas, but she knew from whispered networks and finance columnists that Diana was no quiet socialite. She was the one who had built the Sterling name before Damon made it global. The butler answered with surprise, then ushered her inside. Diana emerged. In a slate blue dress, her silver hair swept into a loose chignon. Her expression was guarded, but not unkind. Miss Hayes, she said coolly, you're either very brave or very desperate. Possibly both, Victoria replied, meeting her gaze directly. I thought you might like to hear from me before someone else tells you I accepted a new position. Outside of Sterling Technologies, Diana studied her. You're leaving my son. Victoria didn't flinch. I'm choosing a future. I haven't decided if he's part of it yet. A long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Diana smiled. He told me once, she said, that you were the only person who ever told him no and meant it. I try to be honest, Victoria said. Well, then let me offer you some in return, Diana said, stepping closer. I was married to power. I birthed ambition, and I watched it cost my son a childhood, a marriage, and trust in anything real. If you walk away now, he'll survive, but something essential in him will dim again. Victoria felt her throat tighten. I didn't come here for guilt. No, Diana said softly. You came because you needed to see if I'd try to stop you. I won't. I trust my son's judgment, and I see exactly why he chose you. Victoria left the estate with the sun finally peeking through the clouds. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sophia. It was Dame. One line. Meet me on the rooftop at noon. Sterling Towers' rooftop terrace had once been a landing pad, now converted into a minimalist garden with glass barriers and wide views of the Seattle skyline. It was empty when she arrived, except for him. Damon stood near the edge, no tie, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair mussed by the wind. He looked like a man no longer interested in being perfect, only in being honest. I didn't know if you'd come, he said without turning. I didn't know if you'd wait, she replied. I'd have waited the rest of my life, he said, finally looking at her. Victoria stepped forward, heart thudding. I visited your mother, she said. That must have been terrifying. He joked lightly, but there was tension in his voice. She didn't try to stop me. In fact, she helped me remember something I already knew. What's that? That the world won't stop talking, no matter what we choose. No matter how honest we are or how clean our intentions seem, there will always be whispers, assumptions, spin, but in the end, the only voice I have to live with every morning is mine. Damon took a step closer. And what is that voice telling you now? She smiled, slow and steady, that I don't want to build a life running away from something. I want to build it running toward someone. A beat passed between them like thunder held in air. Then she reached into her bag and held out a sealed envelope. He looked down at it. The offer? He asked. Declined, she said. Why? He asked quietly. Victoria reached up and adjusted his collar gently, because the best offers in life aren't written in salary numbers. They're found in moments like this, when a man who could have anything chooses vulnerability over power. She stood on her toes and kissed him, gentle, grounded, and final in his decision. He wrapped his arms around her like he'd waited his whole life to hold something that wouldn't shatter in his hands. When they pulled apart, he said, "You're going to change this company, and me, I already have," she whispered. 1 year later, ballroom shimmered once again, this time for the inaugural Sterling Hayes Foundation Gala, hosted jointly by Damon and Victoria. The event raised record-breaking donations for children's tech education initiatives across the Pacific Northwest. Victoria stood at the podium in a flowing emerald gown, her wedding ring gleaming under the lights. Her voice was steady, confident, and warm. "When I was first invited to a gala like this," she said, "I wasn't sure I belonged. But now I realize belonging isn't about where you came from, it's about what you bring with you. And tonight, we bring hope." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Jonathan Pierce sat near the back, watching in silence, humbled by time. Dame and stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, a private smile playing at his lips as he watched the woman who had once been his assistant now command a room of giants. After the final toast, they stepped outside onto the same balcony where she once questioned if she could ever belong. She turned to him. "So, was I worth the risk?" He slipped his hand into hers. "You weren't the risk, Victoria." He kissed her gently. "You were the reward." And beneath the starlit sky, with the city glowing behind them and the future unfolding before them, they walked back inside. Together. Unshaken. Unbreakable. Unwritten no more.